Should you be buying or should you still rent? This is a question that many first time home buyers have, and I'm going to help you figure that out with a great tool that I found online. So, first, you should be renting. There are a few, before we get into the calculator that I want you to use to determine this, there are a few things just you need to make sure you check off before you think about buying a house. So, number one, you want to make sure you are where you want to be long term, like your location. You want to live in that city, you want to live in that state, you want to live in that area for 5 years or more. This calculator is going to help you know exactly how many years you should be looking to live in that city. So make sure that at the minimum, you're willing to live in this place for at least 5 years. The lower interest rates are, the faster you're going to break even on the home purchase. But the higher interest rates are, the more it's going to take you, the longer it's going to take you to break even. So you want to make sure that you're willing to stay in this house, at least right now in today's market. If rates are at 7 or 8%, 5 years or more. And I've been saying for a while, 7 to 10 years. So you're selling that house and you're not, underwater, meaning you owe more than what the home is worth, right? Or it's going to cost you more to sell that home than you're going to make on that property. So that's number one. You want to make sure that you're in the place, if you're going to buy, that you want to be. Number two, you want to make sure that you are financially stable. So that means your employment is stable and you feel like you'll be at that, in that field or in that career for a long time. You'll pretty much be making stable income for at least 5 years, the same amount of time you plan on living in that house. I know that you can't know that 100%, but you need to make sure that you're in a training level, that you're in a field where it's not looking like you're going to be laid off in the very near future. You feel like at least it's very stable for right now. And then lastly, financially, you want to make sure you have an emergency fund of 3 to 6 months minimum of expenses. And if you have a job that you feel is less stable, right, then you may want to have even more money saved before you buy a home. So make sure you're checking off both of those, that you're, locationally, you don't want to move in the next 5 or fewer years, and that you are financially stable before you think about buying. But this calculator is going to help you find out your break even point, because a lot of people are thinking, okay, I'm paying this in rent. This is how much my mortgage will be. Let me just go ahead and buy a house. But you have to factor in some of those costs. You have to put down a down payment. So you're putting down some sort, in most cases, you're putting some sort of down payment down. And then you have closing costs. Those are just costs for buying the house. It doesn't go toward the purchase of the house. It doesn't pay down your mortgage. It's just going to be a fee that you're paying different people, lawyers and real estate agents and the lender. So those are just fees that you pay to purchase a property. So all of that, to make your money back on the sale of the home, there's going to be a break even point. And so again, the lower interest rates are, the faster you're going to break even on that house. Also, the less you're paying in rent, the more it makes sense for you the longer it's going to take you to break even. Okay. And then on the other end, if your rent is high, you're paying high rent, and buying a house would be less expensive, then you're going to break even faster. It's going to make more sense for you to buy instead of rent. And it tells you this in this handy calculator from NerdWallet. So I think it makes it really simple. What I really like about this calculator, it takes into account how much your rent is, right? So how much is your rent? And at what point would you break even if you were to, buy a home where it's going to be less expensive than renting. So let's watch this. Not watch this. Well, you watch it. I'm going to actually fill out the information so you can see it. All right. So I put in Atlanta, Georgia, $400,000 home price, 5% down, an 8% mortgage rate. And then I'm going to put in a monthly rent, because that's the average right now for a 2-bedroom in Metro Atlanta, at about $2,500. So for this example, it has a break even point at about 7 years. Okay. So if you look here, it says if you stay in your home for 2 years, renting is cheaper than buying. But as you go up this curve, it's going to hit a point here where you'll break even, because and the reason why you're breaking even, you have a down payment, you have closing costs, you have some upfront costs in purchasing a home. They're also factoring in things like home maintenance and that sort of thing in this calculator. They use some averages. You can adjust those as well. So you really can play around with this calculator. So your break even would be at about 7 years. But then after that, then buying is is cheaper than renting. Okay. And it kind of gives you all of your, like right here, if you're in year 20 of renting, and they do have rent appreciation, that sort of thing, then you would have spent $703,000. And if you bought, you would have spent $561,000. So I like that it gives you these numbers now. But if you were renting, and say that you were renting at a more affordable price, say you started out renting at $1,500, then you would never break even. It says buying will never be cheaper than renting at 8%, 400,000, where your rent payment at least, began at $1,500. It says after 30 years, you'd have spent $421,000, $899 in rent, and $561,548. I would say at the end of this 30 years, you actually own a house. At the end of the 30 years for renting, you will not own anything. You have nothing to show for. So even though it is more expensive, this purchase is more expensive than the rent, then you could have invested that difference, right? So say over time you invested, maybe it's around $600 or so between, at least right in this window, between the rent price and the buy price. You could have invested that money and maybe made some more money with that, but you still don't own anything at the end of the 30 years. So you just want to think about that, factor that into your decision making. But I like the fact that it does have a break even point, because a lot of times I'm going to put in a higher, say your rent is $3,000. Then your break even point is at right about 4 years. So if you stay in your home for 4 years, buying is cheaper than renting. And I'm doing all of this at 8%. So you just want to make sure that you understand how the numbers work. It may not make sense for you to say, oh, I'm going to, only live in this house for a year or 2 years. Then you may just want to rent if that's the case. But if you are planning on living in this house long term, usually, unless your rental fee is very, very affordable. I had somebody on one of my lives tell me that their rent was $400, and I couldn't justify telling them to go ahead and buy a house. Although the only thing I did say was you can stabilize your expenses. This is when rates were really low, because we didn't know where was that $400 permanent? Was that something that was going to be there for a longer time? And this does have, in this model, they do have rent appreciation, but I just thought that he was never going to be able to stabilize. And if it went up drastically, right, from $400 to $1,000 or $1,500, he may not be able to sustain that. So just, use this. I'll have the link to it in the description of this video, but I thought it was a really handy calculator to know when you broke even. But always remember, let me get out of this. Always remember that you can't pass down your rent, right? So if you are saving substantial, you can pass down your investments and that sort of thing. You want to make sure that you are investing that difference. You're building your wealth. You're still doing it in other ways, because sometimes home ownership is an easy way, because you're living in this house, you're paying your mortgage, so you can stay in that house. So it's something that you easily do because you're paying for where you live. Now, when you have to invest, you have to make sure you're also doing that separate from your living arrangement. That's why housing is usually easier. The majority of people have their wealth in housing because they had to live somewhere. So now, over their years of living, then that house has built equity because it was something that happened, almost forced savings, forced investing, because they paid for where they lived. But when you are investing, it's separate. So you're paying your rent. You have to take some time, open up some brokerage accounts, some investing accounts, and save your money that way. I hope this was helpful. Please let me know what your break even is in the calculators, and let me know if it was helpful to you. Thank you so much. Please like and subscribe to my channel for new videos every week.